Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast, where our goal is simple: to learn from the best and discover how we can all live a better life, build a more fruitful business, and be more productive. Join us each week as we interview fellow entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and leading experts to discuss everything from marketing secrets to new technology and life as an entrepreneur.
Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Sonnenberg, and today it's not just me. We're bringing in a co-host, the one and only Lee Brower. And you've probably heard of Lee before. He's been on the podcast. He is a mentor, a friend, just an amazing, beautiful human being. He is a coach at Strategic Coach, so you might have heard of him from there. He's been in the movie The Secret. He is the one that speaks about gratitude and Gratitude Rocks. And most importantly, he is my partner in our mastermind group, Bullseye, and just a dear friend, amazing person. So I asked him to join me on today's episode because I thought he would be the perfect co-host for today's episode. And the reason for this is a unique guest that we had. It's unlike any guest we've ever had. He's not a CEO. He's not a founder of a company. He's not an expert in productivity or tech. He's actually, in my mind, I view him kind of as a Renaissance type of man, but he is a musician. That's one of the things he does. He's also the star of his documentary called Accidental Courtesy, which I highly recommend on Amazon, I believe. And his name is Daryl Davis. And Daryl spent his life traveling the world as a musician, but he's not on the podcast to talk about music. He's on the podcast to talk about what he does in his spare time, which you are truly not going to believe. So get this. So Daryl is an African-American man, and in his spare time, he likes to talk to and befriend members of the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, you heard me right. The KKK. He actually seeks out members of the KKK and just talks to them. He's not actively trying to convert them. He just wants to sit down and have a conversation. If you watch his movie, and also later in the episode, you'll see at a young age, when he first started understanding about racism, he asked the question, how can someone hate me if they don't even know me? And that one question was so foundational to the rest of his life. And he's a curious person that really wanted to get that question answered. What you're going to see in this episode is that Daryl does end up converting many of these KKK members, but he's not actively trying to change their mind. He just talks to them like normal people, treats them like normal people, and they often end up converting themselves after talking with him for a while. And he's done this with dozens of Klansmen, and he even has many, many robes, he showed me, of former members. And when I say members, I'm not just talking about low-level members. Like, we're talking about some of the highest ranking people. Apparently they're called dragons and wizards. So he's got a ton of robes. So anyway, I don't want to give too much away here. I don't want to speak for Daryl because his story is so unique, so fascinating. I'd much rather you hear it all from him. He is a great guy to talk to, and he's really one of the most well-rounded, level-headed people I've ever met. He has a ton of wisdom to share from his experience that I think we can all learn from and make us all better people. So let's get into this episode and hear what he has to say.
Today's episode is a very unique one. I have, on one hand, my really good friend and partner in Bullseye Mastermind, Lee Brower. Lee is going to be co-hosting today's podcast with me. And our guest on the podcast is a new friend, someone that I met about a month ago at John Levy's influencer salon. And then also you were a speaker at my friend Michael Devillano's Sunday Fun Day event. Right. And that is the one and only Daryl Davis. And I've seen a lot of people speak, but man, Daryl, when I have to say, when I saw you speak at John's, I was like, who the hell is this guy? My God, what a powerful talk. And I've had a lot of people on the podcast before, but this is one of the most exciting conversations that I've looked forward to of any guest. So I don't want to butcher your intro, but I'll just give a brief background and then hand it over to you and shut the hell up here. But Daryl is not only a very well-known and established musician and has performed with some very, very famous people in the music space, but Daryl also is very involved with having conversations with what you would probably think are controversial people. Daryl is African-American, and he has become friends and had many conversations, and we'll probably show some robes on this call, I'm guessing, of members from the KKK that he has sat down and had very interesting conversations with, that then led to a documentary, which you can see on Amazon, called Accidental Courtesy. Daryl, did I miss anything there? Did I butcher it, or was that?
No,
did I cover the basics?
You sure did.
All right. Well, Daryl, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, both to you and Lee.
I'm going to try to make this interesting for you too, so you're not repeating yourself. But could you just maybe give a quick background to the listeners on your story and how you got here? Sure.
I was born in Chicago. My parents are from Virginia. And my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so we spent a lot of time overseas, starting for me at the age of 3 in 1961, and living abroad in Africa and in Europe, visiting many other countries. And now today, as a professional musician, I travel all over the world performing as well and giving lectures. So when you combine my childhood travels with my adult travels, it makes a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents. So starting at an early age, I've been exposed to a multitude of ethnicities, religions, cultures, etc. And all of that has helped shape who I've become and my perspectives on things like race and culture in general. And what I've found out is this, that no matter how far I've traveled from my own country to the opposite ends of the earth or right next door, at the end of the day, we all are human beings. And we all want basically the same simple 4 things: to be loved, to be respected, to be heard. And we want the same things for our families that everybody else wants for their families. As long as we can understand this, despite what differences we may see, physically, visually, belief-wise, or whatever, as long as we accept those four things and apply them, we can get along and we can navigate through society. So that's what I have done with members of white supremacist groups or individuals. Sit down and have dialogue. I've found out that in our country, we spend way too much time talking about the other person or talking at the other person, talking past the other person. So why don't we just spend some time talking with the other person? And that has been probably the key to my success in people, changing their ideologies and renouncing supremacy and things like that.
You mentioned dialogue.
Yes.
And is it possible to have an effective dialogue if you don't have a relationship?
Oh, absolutely. There's always a relationship, but whether it's a contentious one or a hateful one or a loving one, it's some kind of relationship. But what happens is, you want to take control of that relationship and shape it. And you may not be able to directly shape the other person into what you conform them into what you want, but you can certainly shape yourself. And in doing so, that, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but that sort of dictates to the other person how they're going to react to you. Like, I'll give you an example. I had posed a question that I had formed in my head at the age of 10 after having some racial incidents happen to me. The question was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for the answer to that question now for 52 years. So who better to ask?
I remember from I don't mean to interrupt, but when you're hitting that point, Daryl, I remember from watching the Accidental Courtesy.
Right.
But I remembered those 7 words several times since watching that movie, and that, what does this have to do with me?
Yeah.
And that's akin to what you're just saying right there, isn't it? I mean, because okay, I understand, but what does this have to do with me? I had a good, strong feeling when you said that.
What does it have to do with you as to why?
In other words, when you're hearing these things and this contention and these things that are happening,
right,
in terms of the relationship that there is there, but what does this have to do with me?
Right.
You know who you are, right?
Exactly. I know exactly who I am. Yeah. So I want to find out why they think I'm somebody different, and allow me to introduce myself to you, and you might see differently. So how I proceed with that is this. When they first see you, obviously the wall goes right up because I represent something that they don't like. And it's very hard to plant a seed if the wall is up. Seeds will hit the wall and bounce right off. Mm-hmm. All right. So as soon as they see you, that wall is up. And what generally happens with most people is when somebody attacks you, not physically, but, verbally or whatever, you will push back. I prefer not to push back. I just let them get it all out. So I ask the question, how can you hit me when you don't even know me? I'm told that people like me are criminals, and that's evidenced by the fact that there are more blacks in prison than white people. Okay, so I'm thinking, all right, well, this is a half-truth. There are indeed more black people in prison than white people, but the guy is not considering the fact that we have inequity in our judicial system, not considering the fact that there are black and white people in prison who are poor and perhaps cannot afford adequate legal representation. So they take a plea to something that, they didn't even do, and there they sit. So I'm just listening, let them go on. I'm told that people like me are inherently lazy. We don't want to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system and take as many free handouts as we can. And I'm told that black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. And the smaller the brain, the less space for intelligence. The larger the brain, more. And this is evidenced by the fact that black people consistently score lower on SAT scores than white people. So again, this is true. But he's looking at a picture and it fits his narrative. And one's perspective is one's reality. He's not considering the fact that blacks do not get an equal education opportunity that whites do. Blacks out in the suburbs, in the good schools, they score just as equal as anybody else. You go to the inner city, sure. You're going to have, below subpar education, textbooks, teachers, et cetera. They're going to score accordingly. But that's not what he's looking for. That's not what he's seeing. So I let him get all that out. Usually somebody starts saying stuff like that, there's immediate pushback.
Yeah. And
okay, so because I'm not pushing back, he's thrown off his game, and the wall is going down because he's allowed to be heard. One of those 4 things I told you about. So once he gets done, I've given him his platform. He now feels compelled to reciprocate. So then, rather than attack him, because now the wall's down now, rather than attack him and say, no, you're the criminal. You're the one who's burning crosses on people's yards and bombing black churches and synagogues and hanging black men from trees, et cetera. All of which is true, but I'm not going to attack him like that, because as soon as I start attacking him, that wall starts going back up and the seed just hits the wall and falls back, right? Keep the wall down. So rather than go on the offense, I go on the defense. And I say, look, I don't have a criminal record. I never did. Nobody in my family does. I'm not on welfare, never been. Nobody in my family's ever been on welfare. Apparently, my SAT scores were good enough for me to get into college and get me a bachelor's degree. Both my parents had master's degrees. My dad was working on a PhD. And so now I'm saying all this knowing that he just barely made it out of high school. And I have more education in my little finger than he and his whole clan put together. But I'm not going to throw that in his face to insult him, because then the wall goes back up. I just simply defend myself. And so when he goes home, and I know this for a fact because they've told me, when they start renouncing their ideology and giving me their robes and hoods and things like that, what happens is they tell me, they think about it. And it's like, man, I just had a 3-hour conversation with this black guy, and what he said about such and such makes sense, but he's black. But it was true, but he's black. So they're having this cognitive dissonance thing going on. They know it's true, but they don't want to believe it because it came from a black source. So they're fighting it. But you can't fight the truth once you realize it. So that becomes their dilemma. And that only can happen when the wall is down, that I can drop that seed over there, and not on the offense, but on the defense. That seed is planted. And so they have to mull that over. And that becomes their dilemma. And every time I see them again, I water that seed while that wall is down. And then they have to make the decision. Okay, I know what he said was true. Do I disregard his skin color and believe it because I know it to be true and change my direction? Or do I just consider that he's black and just keep living a lie? And so in most instances, not all, but in most instances, they have renounced, the ones that I've dealt with.
I think that one of the most impressive things that I took away from the movie was how much patience you had, and you would really, sit on your hands, shut up, and let them say sometimes the craziest, dumbest things. And I'm sitting there like, man, not that many people I know would just sit there with such patience and kind of allow for that. So My question is, have there been cases where it was just too much and you just get on the offense with them, or is it pretty much all really. The time you're able to handle staying on the defense? Because that takes a lot of self-control.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the only time where it's gotten too much is, and I have had to, get violent and hurt somebody. I've done that before too, because somebody put their hands on me, and sometimes, that can happen. And I'm not going to, sit there and do that. I will fight. I will attack. And I put people in the hospital. I put people in jail. But, fortunately, those things have been few and far between. But even some of them have come back to me, not all. Some of them have come back and said, hey, man, I'm sorry. I understand what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But what it is my background. When I lived overseas in the 1960s as a child in school, my classes were so diverse. It was like a United Nations of small children. And that's what I grew up around. To me, that was the norm, right? And when I would come back home, I would either be in an all-black school or a black and white school, meaning the still segregated or newly integrated school. And there was not the amount of diversity that I had overseas. So that today we call that multiculturalism. That term did not even exist in the 1960s when I was a kid. To me, it was just the norm. And so in retrospect, now as an adult, I see that when I was growing up overseas, I was living a good 10 years or so into the future because that diverse classroom setting had yet to come to this country. So I was already prepared for it. I knew what the world should look like, right? So when you see me sitting there and people are spewing all this stuff, I realize that they have not had the experience that I've had. They have not seen the world the way I've seen it. It doesn't make me a better person or a better human being. It simply gives me a broader perspective than what they have seen. And I've come to realize, it's a fact that most Americans do not travel, and less than 50% of us even have passports.
Yeah.
Europeans travel all the time. So they're always seeing different stuff and they're more acceptive of different things. We don't see that much. So I realize that is a shortcoming in somebody. So when they start spewing all this stuff, it doesn't degrade me, because I know who I am. So I don't have to believe a lie that they're telling, oh, this is my skin color or thinking I'm selling out to somebody. So that doesn't matter to me. But here's the thing also, two things. Never go into an adversarial situation, whether it's about race, whether it's about abortion or the current presidency or nuclear weapons or global warming or the war in the Middle East, whatever the hot topic is, don't get into it unless you have taken time to research and study your adversary's position and their ideology so that you understand where they're coming from. So that way you can speak on their level. Because even though they may not like you, they will respect you if they see that you have knowledge of their background and their position. So that's number one. Number two, know who you are. Know who you are. Make sure you have your self-esteem there. Because if you don't know who you are, you got no business going in that room with them because they will tell you who you are. And depending upon your level of self-esteem, you might walk out of there believing them.
Well, you just gave us two great things. Is there a third? I mean, one is understand who you're talking to, right?
Right.
Know their history, show that you're interested, and be more focused on being interested than interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And and give you don't have to respect what they're saying,
no,
but respect their right to say it.
Yeah.
And focus on they want to be heard. So in order for you to be heard, you can't shut them down.
Right.
You have to give them that space.
So are there no groups as large as, say, the KKK in Europe? Is the U.S. really like the epicenter of white supremacist groups?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they do have some over there, but yeah, we are the epicenter. And you know what? They take their cues oftentimes from us. They take their cues from us. For example, the swastika is banned in Germany. You're not allowed to use it. You cannot use it publicly, and you cannot use it privately. You can't be flying it in your own home even. When neo-Nazis over there have their little public rallies or whatever, you know what they use? Since they can't use the swastika, they'll be arrested. Take a wild guess.
I don't even want to say what I'm thinking.
Go ahead, say it.
The flag of the United States.
That's right. They use our battle flag, the Confederate battle flag.
Wow.
Because to them, that represents white supremacy. So it's kind of surreal if you see neo-Nazis marching over in Berlin or somewhere with our Confederate flag.
Huh.
Wow.
Well, that's
and look at the George Floyd thing. Protests in Berlin, in Paris, in London, in different places. They take their cues from us.
another thing that was interesting to see in the movie, and I don't know if it was the editing, and I'm sure that behind the scenes there's a lot of other things, but it seemed like the most intense conversation you had, or the most controversial, that almost felt like a fight could break out, wasn't
it almost did.
Was with another African-American person, not with someone from the KKK, which I found to be, surprising. Is that something that you've found in general, that what you represent actually sparks something even more intense within the in a subset of the African-American community?
Well, let me explain that to you. Okay. You're talking about the interview that I did with the members of Black Lives Matter in Baltimore.
Right.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me give you a little bit of background on Black Lives Matter. So I don't want to paint them with a broad brush because you can't. Black Lives Matter is not an organization. It is a movement. And the founders did not want to trademark the name. They did not want to centralize the organization. So it'd just be organic. And the idea behind it, I thought, was a fantastic idea, to put the national spotlight on the plight of Black men who, for lack of better terminology, were being murdered by white police officers. So they got to go to their graves, whereby white men in the same situation either went home or went to jail. Some went to jail via Burger King, like Dylan Roof, if you recall, the young man who went into the Black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and murdered 9 Black parishioners conducting Bible study. And he was armed to the teeth, had extra ammunition and guns on him when he was arrested. They put him in the squad car and he said, "I'm hungry." And they drove him to Burger King, bought him a hamburger, and then took him to jail and processed him, fingerprinted and photographed him. Whoever heard of such? All right. So this is a man who was a violent criminal. All right. You look at armed and dangerous, just murdered 9 people. Then you look at somebody like Eric Garner up in Staten Island, New York, the original I Can't Breathe guy, who was selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk, a nonviolent crime. Sure, he's breaking the law, arrest him or give him a ticket, take him to jail. But you don't choke the life out of him on camera on the sidewalk when he's not resisting, and he doesn't get his day in court. All right. You look at George Floyd. What was he accused of? He was accused of allegedly passing a fake $20 bill, a counterfeit $20 bill. We will never know if he knew that he had a fake $20 bill. Maybe he did. Maybe he was intentionally trying to, pass that money and get real money back. Or it could have been he had a $100 bill in his pocket yesterday or something and bought something and the clerk gave him back some 20s and one of those was fake. That would have been determined in a court of law as to whether he actually knew what he was doing. All right. The clerk, of course, where he passed the $20 bill, recognizes this as a fake 20, and he does what he's supposed to do, call the police. But do we know that George Floyd actually knew he had a fake $20 bill? That would have been determined in court. He did not get his day in court because those police officers basically lynched him. That's exactly what they did. All right. So that's why, again, a nonviolent crime. He didn't get to go to Burger King, but somebody who just murdered 9 people goes to Burger King. That's why Black Lives Matter was formed. The problem that I have with it is the founders, like I said, did not want to trademark the name or be centralized. They just wanted to be organic. At the time when they founded it, they had no idea how big it would blow up. There are like 80, 90 chapters all around the country. You can walk out your house right now, or you too, Lee, and start your own chapter of Black Lives Matter because nobody has the trademark to the name. So as a result, you have too many chefs in the same kitchen. And this group is on this page, that group's on that page. There's a group in Detroit, another group in New York, who contacted me and said, "Hey, do you give workshops? Can you teach us to do what you do?" And then, then there are other groups, such as the one in Baltimore, who just, want to rip me a new one and call me every name in the book but my own. So, they're all over the place. And then when the media talks about Black Lives Matter, let's say that that your group, Nick, is doing something good. They're being responsible and trying to have dialogue and trying to persuade lawmakers to do this and do that. Whereby, and you're in, where are you, Lee? I'm sorry, Nick. You are.
I'm in Manhattan.
Okay, Manhattan, and Lee, you're in.
We live in St. George, Utah.
St. George, Utah, right? So the group in St. George, Utah, is doing something destructive and violent. That group of Black Lives Matter. The media doesn't say the St. George chapter of Black Lives Matter. It just says Black Lives Matter showed up and did blah, blah, blah. And that paints the whole movement, including yours, with a broad brush in a negative way, which is why it's important to be centralized, like, say, the NAACP or the Red Cross or the Boy Scouts of America, where policy is created at headquarters and disseminated to all the chapters around the country so everybody's on the same page. You don't have that with BLM right now. And to me, that's very disappointing because, we've come a long way and we're coming a long way. And now is not the time to be divisive. In terms of your question, how do I just sit on my hands and not react? Is because I've seen from my childhood that people can get along. And that's what it takes, to listen to one another. And I've proven that. I've proven that by the people who've left these organizations and come out on tour with me and lecture with me against their former organization, to de-radicalize people already in there and prevent new people from joining those kinds of groups. So when I see somebody, attacking me, I realize they have not seen what I've seen. And to be quite honest, if I were to turn on my TV set or open up a magazine and I see a picture of a Black guy shaking hands with some guy in a robe and a hood, I'm going to have a visceral reaction as well. But knowing me, I'm going to read the backstory. Well, why is this guy doing that? Why are they shaking hands? Oh, okay, I get it now. He's not, acquiescing to this guy and kissing his rear end. I get it now what he's doing, and I'm okay. But so many people see the picture, have the reaction, and they don't bother to read the backstory. They jump to a conclusion. Well, he's an Uncle Tom. He's an Uncle Ruckus. He's an Oreo. He's, a sellout. He's a race trader. And I'll tell you right now, Black supremacist type people are no different than white supremacist type. If you were to go out on a date, let's say, with a Black woman, or you were married to one, a white supremacist would hate you more than that Black person because you have sold out your race. You look just like him, and you have sold out your race. All right? It's the same thing with Black.
That's what happened.
That's exactly what happened. Okay, because I sat down and talked to those people that are considered to be the enemy, and I treated them with respect. That's how we treat any human being, because that's what I want in return. So they saw that, and they just went off. But a year later, they reached out to me and wanted to get together because they'd seen interviews, et cetera, and they were coming around. And we got together, we had dinner, we became friends. I guess maybe 5-6 months ago, I was at another event and one of them fell off the wagon. I went off again. So it happens.
Now, it seems, though, that the root of why they went off, I think, at least my interpretation was that they are assuming that people can't change.
Right.
Is that fair to say that?
Well,
that's part of the.
You heard him say right there in the movie, a white supremacist cannot change. Well, so here's my question. All right. Now, I pointed out the ignorance there. When I first met the guy in the parking lot, if you remember, we were handing out lunch to the homeless and stuff. The first thing he says to me is, I understand you're the first Black member of the KKK. Well, obviously he hadn't done his research, and that's a very ignorant statement. If there were Black members of the KKK, there wouldn't be a KKK. Simple as that, right? So I explained, no. I meet with them, I talk with them, I try to understand where they're coming from, and I end up with their robes and hoods. So then in the bar scene where he was joined by the other members, it became like gang-like mentality, and I was wasting my time, and I had a fetish with collecting robes and a white supremacist cannot change and all this other kind of stuff. Well, here's the thing. Here's the hypocrisy. They're out there marching back and forth and attacking the police through their bullhorns because of the Freddie Gray case and other cases. And granted, the police should be attacked, okay? I have testified numerous times against the police when the DOJ did an investigation of the Baltimore City Police. They came to my house and took my testimony because I've had issues with Baltimore City Police as well. Okay, and I helped testify, and that was in their report. But anyway, what's the point in marching up and down the street in front of the Baltimore City Police Department if you don't think they can change? You're just, blowing hot air. If nobody's going to, if you don't believe in change, then why waste your time? And guess what? I got the robes and hoods and a police uniform to prove that change can happen. How many police uniforms have they collected of police officers who said, yeah, I was a racist, I was wrong, here's my uniform?
Could we see what one of the robes looks like by any chance?
You want to see one of the robes?
Yeah.
All right,
that'd be
hang tight one
cool.
second.
All right, let's
Off here.
One of the things that I could see in the movie was the pain that the men had. That when they were attacking, they had so much pain and I think they felt betrayal. I mean, it's from Daryl.
Yeah.
And when you betrayal to me is one of the most difficult emotions to get over. And when you're feeling that betrayal, it's like that. So here we are.
This is the robe of one of the Grand Dragons from Maryland. All right. And this guy, he went to prison for 4 years for conspiring to bomb a synagogue up on Liberty Road in Baltimore.
Wow.
And he continued running the Klan while he was in prison through his guy on the outside. When he got out, he took it back over the Klan, continued running it, and then he went back to prison for 3 years for assault with intent to murder 2 black men with a shotgun. And then when he got out that time, I contacted him and we got together. He was vehemently violent, dangerous, hateful, anti-Semitic, racist, etc. But my continued conversations with him led him to becoming one of my best friends.
Wow. And
this is his Robin Hood. Now, as a Klan member, you don't make money unless you're embezzling some of the dues, and a lot of them do that. That's why they have all these splinter groups who get mad because you took their money and didn't do what you're supposed to do with it. You have, Grand Dragon, Imperial Wizard, Great Titan, Exalted Cyclops. These are all titles. You don't get paid for that. It's like Boy Scout leader. You have to have a regular job. His regular job, when he was in the Klan doing some of these stupid things, he was a Baltimore City police officer. This is his uniform. Okay, this is his uniform.
Wow.
All right. This is another Grand Dragon's robe. You have your choice. Green is the color for the Grand level. Grand means state. Dragon is your top state leader, like we would call a governor. They call it the dragon. Anybody grand is on the state level. A Grand Caliph would be like a lieutenant governor. So you see this green belt and the green cape and the green stripes on the sleeves. So you have your choice of a white cotton robe with green adornments or a full green satin robe, like I just showed you with the other Grand Dragon. 2 different Grand Dragons. No difference, just a preference of material. All right. Imperial means the national level. The national level would be like what we would call a president. So they call their top guy the Imperial Wizard. And you can have a full white cotton robe with purple stripes and a purple cape and purple belt. Of course, you have the Mayoke, the Klan symbol, or you have a full purple satin robe. Also blue is the imperial level. So I also have a full purple satin robe. And I think now I got about maybe between 54 and 57 robes.
So you're covered for Halloween for the next few years.
Absolutely.
I
can cover right? You and your whole family too.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
That's right.
Do you think that anyone, I mean, you've sat down and spoken to some people with very, very strong opinions that are totally against what you believe. Do you believe that anyone can change with the right conversation setting? Or have you ever met someone where you're like, man, this wall is just too high, but we can't
yeah, sure. Down. I believe that anyone can change, but I don't believe that everyone will change. There will be people who will go to their grave on either side being hateful, violent, and racist. There's no changing them. But if they're willing to sit down and have a conversation, there's a possibility. And all these people, are steeped in their beliefs. You don't just go join the Klan, just sign a piece of paper and you're in the Klan. No, you go through a ritual and you do a blood oath It's like a fraternity kind of thing, and that becomes your family. This robe becomes your badge of honor, your uniform, and stands for what you believe in above and beyond everything else. So when they give that up, that'll be like General Colin Powell taking off his U.S. military uniform and handing it over to Osama bin Laden, taking off a robe and hood and giving it to a Black man. Just doesn't happen. So yes, people can change. And I've seen it. I've seen it many, many times. But it requires patience, and it requires a skill in navigating the conversation with these people. And like I said, at the end of the day, there'll be some people who will never change, but you don't give up on them. But you focus more on the ones, that you're making headway with.
I'm Jewish. Are they more, I'm just curious, do they have more hate towards African-American people or Jewish people?
Both, but as of the late 50s and throughout the 60s and stuff, more towards Jewish people, because they feel that Jewish people, they call it ZOG, Z-O-G, which stands for Zionist Occupied Government. And they came to the conclusion around that time that Jews were responsible, that Black people are simply the pawns of Jews. Jews run the media, they run the newspapers, the TV stations, they run the banking system, this, that, and the other. So what it is jealousy, envy, and so they figure that these people are in control and they don't even like Jesus Christ. So, because, in the initial Klan, the first Klan that was formed in 1865, it lasted till about 1871. And there were Jews in the Klan and there were Catholics in the Klan. And see, the Klan was simply a reflection of the Confederacy. And naturally, in the Confederacy, there were Jewish slave owners who did not want to give up that money, that free labor. There were Catholics, there were other Protestants, et cetera, who did not want to give up that free money and give up that money for free labor. So they fought against the Jews, the whites, and Blacks in the Union. Then in 1871, Congress, the Klan had become so violent and widespread in other states that Congress passed some acts called the Ku Klux Klan Acts of 1871. And part of that is what we use today when we sue the police. It was taken from those acts of 1871. That drove the Klan underground, and they kind of like dwindled. And then in 1915, a filmmaker named D.W. Griffith put out a movie that was very innovative for its time called Birth of a Nation that glorified the Klan. And the next thing you know, there was a second wave, a revival of the Klan. So same Klan, and what they did was they modified the bylaws. This time, they decided that you had to believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. You were not allowed to reveal any Klan business to aliens. An alien is their term for anyone who is a non-member of the Ku Klux Klan. So you have what they call their membership. They call that the Invisible Empire. And anybody outside the Invisible Empire is an alien. All right. So you cannot reveal Klan business to any aliens, and you had to hold allegiance to the United States. So that right there barred Jews and Catholics. Jews were barred because while they believe that Jesus Christ did exist, they don't believe that he was the Son of God. He was just a normal man, right? And then they barred Catholics for two reasons. One, Catholics held their allegiance to the Pope, and the Pope is in Rome in the Vatican. So they're not following the Klan law of holding allegiance to the United States if you're holding allegiance to Rome in Italy. So number one. Number two, you cannot reveal any Klan business to an alien. So if a Catholic goes out and goes night riding and strings somebody up a tree or something, where does he go? He goes to confession. Well, guess what? The priest is an alien. So you're revealing business to an alien. So that, they just barred all the Catholics. In the early 1970s, when membership was kind of dwindling, they opened the doors a little wider in order to bring in more members, and they began to allow Catholics to join. So now you have Catholics in the Klan. There was a Jewish guy. Well, in fact, I've met one Jewish guy who was in the Klan. He was an undercover. He was an undercover operative. But there was another one in there. Look him up. I'll tell you about him. His name was Daniel Burros, B-U-R-R-O-S, Dan Burros. And in fact, he was in the Klan right there in New York. He had become a Grand Dragon, and he was a self-hating Jew, and nobody knew that he was Jewish, but somebody had found out. And I think the New York Times or something was going to expose him, and he freaked out. And so he went down to Pennsylvania to talk to the Grand Dragon down there, who was his good friend, a guy named Roy Frankhauser. And I knew Roy Frankhauser very well. Roy Frankhauser was a very dangerous Klansman. He'd been arrested over 60 to 80 times. He was involved in the Birmingham bus beatings, when the Freedom Riders came down to desegregate the bus station. He participated in those beatings. He has bombed churches and synagogues, all kinds of stuff. But I interviewed him for the book that I wrote on the Klan, and I used to go see him quite regularly. And he loved flea markets, so we go to all these flea markets together. Well, Dan Burroughs, the official story goes, Dan Burroughs committed suicide in Roy's room upstairs in his house. And that's where I was sitting. And Roy, the blood is still on the ceiling where Dan Burroughs shot himself and splattered his brains and stuff all up on the roof, on the ceiling. And Roy has a Klan flag over it right now. And so he just took it down and showed me this. But in talking with him, he didn't come out and say it, but there's a possibility, I'll say, that Dan did not commit suicide. But
I was going to say, why would he decide to go and commit suicide in that place rather than just doing it in his own home? Exactly. That's one thing, one way to think about it. I guess like a black Jew would be like the ultimate, or does it cancel each other out? Like 2 negatives equal a positive, or... Not in their eyes. It's just double negative. but I'll tell you a funny story though. I can tell you countless ones, but one of my musicians, that saxophone player, he's a Jewish guy, and he also has his own klezmer band, playing Jewish folk music and stuff. So he plays, rock and roll in my band and plays klezmer in his band. He was doing a bar mitzvah over in Arlington, Virginia. And the parents or whatever, they wanted some rock and roll, some klezmer music, et cetera. So he hired me to play with his band for that gig. So I go down there, they're doing a klezmer set. I'm sitting over here, and there's this guy sitting at this table with his wife and some other people. And the guy's just staring at me. And so I'm thinking, okay, why is this guy looking at me? Maybe he's seen me play somewhere before, because that's usually the case. I'm out of context. They say, I've seen him play before. And usually they'll approach me and say that. But, he wasn't doing that. And then I did my set with the band, and he's like watching me, on the piano. And then on the break, I head to the restroom. And lo and behold, the dude comes in there. And he's just hanging out by the sink. And, when I came over to the sink, I'm washing my hands and stuff. And he's like looking around, looking down on the floor, see if anybody's under the stalls or whatever. And then he says to me, he goes, Daryl Davis. And so that put me a little more at ease. Okay, the guy knows my name. He's probably seen me play somewhere or whatever. And he looks around, and I see him. He's like looking under the stalls or whatever, see if anybody's in any of these stalls. And, he's satisfied nobody's there. He goes, do you remember me? And I'm looking at the guy, and, I could have sworn I'd seen him, in a robe and hood. And, sometimes they wear the mask. Sometimes, they have the mask off, depending upon, how much anonymity they want. So I saw the face, and I said, I've seen this guy in a robe and hood, I'm pretty sure. But I wasn't positive. I didn't want to just ask him, because, it'd be kind of stupid. Why would he be at a bar mitzvah, of all places? So I'm looking at him, and he goes, Little Bennett. And I said, oh, my goodness. Because Little Bennett was this park where there was this Klan rally some years past. And I was there at that rally. And so I realized, that's him. That's the Klansman, right? So I said, yeah, man. I said, what are you doing here? He said, looks around, make sure nobody's in the room again. He goes, I left the Klan. I married a Jewish girl. I want you to meet my wife. And so I said, okay. So then he tells me, he says, no, you can't say anything about that. That's in the past. She doesn't even know. I said, okay. So, we came out there, I went over to his table, and I met his Jewish wife, and all was good. But I've seen multiple stories like that. Amazing.
What do we do with a system that's so broken in the past? It's often said you can't change the past.
But you can take where you are and change the future.
Reinterpret the past.
Mm-hmm. Well,
learn from it.
Yeah, we should learn from it. We can't revise it. We can't change it. But who was it? It was C.S. Lewis who said we can't change the past, but we can start from where we are and shape the future or something.
Yeah.
We have to address the past, and there are ways to do it and ways not to do it. Like, I mean, let's talk about the monuments for a second, Confederate monuments and the flag and all that kind of stuff. That's part of our history. Now, granted, a lot of those monuments were not put up right after the Civil War. They were put up in the 1920s and the 1960s as a slap in the face to integration. All right, so they're not original Civil War monuments anyway. But I don't believe that those monuments should be ripped down and torn down and destroyed. I believe that they should be taken down and put in a museum or build a Confederate memorial park. Go stick them over there. They should not be erected on public property, and that flag should also go inside a museum. We are not the Confederate States of America. We are the United States of America. And here's the thing. Most white people in this country are of British descent. Because they were the ones who came over here to escape the tyranny of the king initially, right? And we went to war against Great Britain, and we beat them, which is why we celebrated almost a month ago on the 4th of July, our independence. So because we beat them, the loser, King George III, does not get his statue built here on U.S. soil, and British Americans don't go around, flying the Union Jack and honoring statues of King George III. They lost, all right? We went to war against Japan when they bombed Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. And there are plenty of Japanese Americans in this country. Yet, and they have ancestry from Japan that fought in that war. And while they may honor their ancestors, they don't build statues here on this property to Emperor Hirohito and fly the Japanese flag. No. We went to war against Germany. There are tons of German Americans in this country. We beat Adolf Hitler. The German Americans do not build statues to Hitler or Goebbels or anybody else and fly swastikas unless they're neo-Nazis or something. So the loser does not get to build his statue and fly his flag on the winner's land. So the Confederacy lost the war. They need to get over it. All right. They don't get to build their statues. They can take their statues, put them in a Confederate memorial park, and people can go there and honor them or put them in a museum. I don't believe in erasing history. We all have a history, good, bad, ugly, and shameful, and it all needs to be displayed.
So why do you think it's been allowed then, or why has it been tolerated to have all the Confederate flags and statues up to this point?
Because we live in a very racist society. We've had presidents who are racist. We've had presidents who were in the Klan. For example, President Warren G. Harding was sworn into the Ku Klux Klan in the green room of the White House. Harry Truman, before he became president, he joined the Klan. He was only there for a short period of time. He figured he didn't like it, and he got out. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black was in the Klan when he got the appointment to be a Supreme Court justice. He had to leave the Klan to sit on the Supreme Court. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia, who just died a few years ago, he was the oldest living senator. He was in the Klan in the 1940s. He was a Grand Kleagle. Grand means state, Kleagle means recruiter. So he was a Grand Kleagle for the state of West Virginia. So, we've had all kinds, from third grade dropout all the way to President of the United States, governors, mayors, et cetera. There were people who fought against integration. And so, listen, the Civil War never really ended. Officially, it ended in 1865, all right? But it didn't really end, it mutated, all right? So you were no longer allowed to own people like me. So, okay, fine, we can't own you anymore, we gotta free you, but you know what? You're not gonna come into our restaurants, and you're gonna drink from that water fountain and use that bathroom and sit in that waiting area. And if you come to our restaurant, you have to go through the back door and get your food and get out. Okay, so it mutated from ownership of these people to segregation and Jim Crow. And then when integration came in, it mutated again. Okay, so now, we got to let you in, but you're going to have your own seating section. Like in the movie theaters, blacks sat up in what was called the peanut gallery and things like that. So then when they began integrating that, okay, so now we have to hire you, but you're not going to have a desk job, not in this company. You're going to mop the floors and clean the bathrooms. And then, then we had to have, that's why the EEOC was created, equal employment EEOC was that Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. There you go. To make sure everybody was treated equally on the job, and HR departments. So finally, we got to sit at the desk, but we would only get promoted so high, and people who were white were getting promoted over us, even though we were qualified. My father was one of the first Black Secret Service agents in this country. My dad wanted to be an FBI agent, and J. Edgar Hoover was a racist and a male chauvinist, and among a lot of other things he was. He wasn't hiring any females or any Blacks. So my dad went to the Secret Service and applied. And Harry Anslinger, who was the head of the Secret Service, hired 5 Black men at one time. And my dad was one of those 5. And there have been books written about him and different things that he did worthy of writing about for the Secret Service. And they promoted him, but there was a ceiling. He could only go but so high. And white agents who were not even as qualified as him were getting promoted over him. And so Richard Nixon was a vice president at the time to Dwight Eisenhower. And he was going to go to Russia to do his kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev. It was called the kitchen debate. And of course, Nixon did not speak any Russian. So my dad spoke 9 languages fluently. He just had a knack for languages. He spoke 9 fluently. He could read and write in 4 of them. And so the State Department put out some kind of advertisement looking for Americans who were fluent in Russian. My dad was. So my dad went and applied for the gig. He got it. And he went with Richard Nixon and about 30 other people in his entourage to Moscow. He was one of Nixon's interpreters. So when they got back, Nixon told Eisenhower about it. And they called him into the White House and talked with him. And they told him that he had gone as far as he could go in the Secret Service, but he could probably go a little further because he was Black, but he could probably go a little further in the Foreign Service. And they suggested that he take the Foreign Service exam. And he took the Foreign Service exam and he passed it and he became a Foreign Service officer. And that's what led to us traveling all around the world. So, that's why, these things have been there and people aren't taking them down. And now people have had enough of them. And so, but there's a way to remove them, and removing the statues is not going to change anybody's attitude. If your attitude is already there, that you're a racist, taking down the statue is not going to change that. But the statue does need to come down. But we also, at the same time, need to educate people as to why these symbols should not be standing around. For the same reason we don't have Emperor Hirohito and King George III standing around out here. Again, this does not make me a better person. It just makes me have a broader perspective than someone else who's not had the same experience. When I was a kid, like I said, I lived overseas a lot. Every 2 years we'd come home. But during those 2 years, you're given R&R, rest and recuperation. You're giving home leave. And then at the end of the 2 years, you come home anyway. So most Americans, since the government's paying for it, the 2 vacations during the 2-year period, most Americans will come back home. We wouldn't come back home because, we knew we were coming back anyway at the end of the 2-year assignment, unless there was some emergency, going on back here, family or whatever, then we'd take that and come back. So on those 2 vacations, my father, since the government's paying for it, would take us to other countries so we could see something else at the government's expense. So as a little kid, we think that all little kids do what we do. We don't know any different. And so I appreciated that as a kid, but I appreciated it even more when I would come back home and I would be in my world history class or geography class, and we would be studying the Mona Lisa, the Berlin Wall, the Eiffel Tower, the Sphinx, the pyramids, things like that, the path in Damascus, Syria, where Jesus allegedly walked. I've been to all those things. I've been inside the Sphinx. I've been inside the pyramids. I've been to the top of the Eiffel Tower. I've touched the Berlin Wall. I stood 3 feet from the Mona Lisa. Today, you can't even get anywhere close to her because she's surrounded by this glass enclosure because somebody tried to throw some fluid on her a few years back or something. But I've been to all those things as a kid. And so I really appreciated it a lot more when I'm here in, junior high school, and we're studying these things in the textbooks. And I realize that the majority of kids sitting around me, the closest they will ever come to those things are those pictures in that book. And I've been there simply because they don't travel, and So like I said, I've seen a lot of these things, and I know it can work. I can sit in a classroom with white people from Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, France, Germany, Norway, Finland, Australia, Switzerland, and we all get along. Even if we don't speak the same language, we still get along. We play together, we have lunch together, we have slumber parties together, and then I come home to my own country and get, rocks and things thrown at me for being the only Black Cub Scout by people who are my fellow Americans who are probably less white than the white Europeans that I hung out with overseas.
So, Daryl, what I'm hearing too, though, is gratitude played a huge part in your ability to be able to deal with it. And I think that as someone that has been around the topics of gratitude and kind of at the center of it accidentally, you talk about accidental courtesy, that was an accidental on my part. But having been in the movie The Secret and being involved with the Gratitude Rock and being involved in ways that changed my life to look at gratitude in a completely different way. Let me just ask you, what I'm seeing right now and the perspective I'm taking now from this is the power of gratitude, and how can we as a society introduce true gratitude, not that phony gratitude, but true gratitude into our education system, into our families. I guess it starts with our families and outsource. What can we do as a society? This is a pending question with me all the time, is I truly believe that if we're not careful, we're going to surrender our ability to think for ourselves. We're going to surrender our agency because convenience is stepping up to the plate and actually robbing us of becoming good decision makers. We're getting options instead of choice.
Yes, and that's been going on for quite a while now. It goes on, especially in our news media. We're being told what to think instead of being told how to think. And back in the days of Chet Huntley and David Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and Barbara Walters and people like this, they were giving the news.
Yeah.
And today what we're getting are opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's come on so subtly that we're just accustomed to it. And so you got these people who watch Fox News, those who watch CNN, and those who watch MSNBC, and you can tell what station they watch just by their opinions.
So Lee and I were literally just talking about this 2 days ago on the phone, where I'm like, man, I'm not a very political person, but I can't stand Fox. I can't stand CNN. Like, you just you can't trust any of it right now. So Lee was sharing that some of the news source where he's getting some of the facts from.
It's hard to find it. You need to triangulate. And so
NPR,
that 5-minute summary in the morning and the 5-minute summary in the afternoon, where they just have the time to give the facts. And I remember a time when there was a big debate between, because we were moving the embassy in Israel. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know why people were arguing this. So they were throwing rocks at each other. Just saying this is bad and that's bad. And I happened to fall upon an NPR chant where they had, this is why we should do it over here. This is why we shouldn't do it over here. And nobody's casting stones at each other. And I had a chance to listen to both of them. I wish NPR did that all the time, but they do it. They try to do it more than other places that I've gone to. It's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah. NPR, C-SPAN, can be a good source.
Even BBC seems to be a better source.
Let me tell you something, man. And you've probably been overseas. If you want to learn about your own country, go pick up a foreign newspaper. I'm serious.
No.
We accuse Russia of brainwashing their people through their media. We do the same thing through our media to ourselves. When I was overseas in some of the French-speaking countries, the Herald Tribune, which is a French paper, you'd be like, I'll give you a classic example. You remember Daniel Pearl?
Sure.
He was the first journalist who got beheaded in the Iraqi War, and he'd gone missing for a while, and nobody knew where he was, and so forth and so on. And then it was reported on our media, the United States media, that the body of Daniel Pearl had been found in a ditch, and he was mortally wounded. Those are the words used. We didn't find out until about a week later that he was beheaded. And how did we find that out? Because that's what was in a British London Daily Times or something. They told it like it was. And when we questioned why were we not told that? We're told that it was too gruesome, and the American public would not know how to handle that, something like that. We need to know the facts. We need to know the truth. And so then, beheadings became a regular thing. We were, getting those reports, but we did not learn that first one until, the British papers put it out. And so that's why it's important, to get other perspectives from other sources other than just what we have.
I read something the other day that just said that it just kind of caught my attention. It said protesters stormed the Capitol. This was the state Capitol. And then it went on, and then as time went on, the group swelled to a group of 100. But the headline was protesters stormed the Capitol, whatever the issue was. But then,
sensationalized.
They sensationalized this group that eventually swelled to 100. And I'm not sure how they counted that. So we get the opportunity to be thinkers for ourselves right now more than ever. We really get the opportunity. It's not that we have to do anything. We get the opportunity to really kind of step back and to listen to the things that you're saying. I mean, there's so many nuggets in what you've said. And you not only said the nuggets, but you've given here's 3 things or here's 4 things. And believe me, I'm going to go back and capture those, Daryl. I think that the world needs to pay attention to some of those specific points that you've made.
Well, where I feel that, we are lacking is in our educational systems, our schools, and also our religious institutions, I think are letting us down. I'm a Christian. I was a deacon in my church there for a while and all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. We get our education primarily from school because that's where we are several hours a day as kids before we come home. And depending upon what our parents reinforce with us determines, how tenacious we are in hanging on to that education. And then the other big source is our religious beliefs and our church. And starting at a young age, whether you're Mormon, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, whatever, we all have some form of Sunday school. And so, we're down in the basement as little kids learning that God made a rainbow of different colors of people, and God loves us all. We're all God's children, and et cetera, et cetera. And because we're 4 and 5 and 10 years old or whatever, that's what we accept because that's what we're told by our Sunday school teacher. And then as we, reach puberty or whatever, adolescence, we get kicked upstairs to the larger congregation and we sit with our parents. But here's the problem. In the larger congregation upstairs, the priest, the minister, the reverend and pastor, the rabbi, whatever the clergy is, no longer continues that Sunday school lesson. He is not saying we're all God's children, God made a rainbow and all kinds of stuff. Because what would happen if let's say this Catholic minister, Catholic priest says, okay, folks, it's okay now for all y'all Catholics, if you want to marry Jewish people, you can go right ahead. You have the blessings of the Catholic Church. Half the congregation is going to get up and walk out, or they're going to get rid of that priest, get somebody else in there. But one thing's for sure, they're not going to put their money in the collection plate because, you only pay for what you want to hear. You only pay for what you want to hear. And, that's why it's important to have a good preacher, a good charismatic person. So when the plate goes around, hey, I like that guy's sermon. I'm going to put $20 in the plate this time, whatever, instead of my customary $1 or whatever. So the priest, the rabbi, whoever, they know what it's supposed to be. We are all God's children, but they stop preaching it because their objective is to make money for this institution. And what they're doing is they're putting money above morality. And then here's what happens. Let's say now this kid is in high school and he's a senior and he's going to go to senior prom. So this night, I'm just using, hypothetical. So let's say he's Jewish this time. So his mom says, who are you taking to the senior prom? I want to buy her a corsage, for you on her. He says, I'm going to take Kelly O'Donnell. And the mom's like, well, Kelly's a nice girl, but don't you think, you should take maybe take Molly Greenberg, a nice little Jewish girl? And the guy says, well, I thought we were all God's children. Yes, we are, but the but comes out. And see, but is not a God word. But's not in the Bible. But, God didn't have any exceptions. You can do this and do this, but no, that's a man-made word. And it is. And that's where your racism comes in, And so that's the problem. the clergy does not go there in most religious institutions because they don't want to get fired or they don't want to lose their congregation, and the goal is to make money for that institution. So they don't want to go there like the Sunday school teacher did. And why is it that the Sunday school teacher is not concerned about going there? Because these little 4 and 5-year-olds don't have any money to put in the plate. So she can say whatever she wants to say down in the basement, right? And see, you have white Baptist churches and you have Black Baptist churches. And they both use the same Bible. They both pray to the same God, same Jesus Christ. They interpret the Bible the same way. Baptists interpret the Bible like Baptists do, as opposed to Lutherans or Methodists or Presbyterians. Why are there Black Baptist churches? Because back in the day, they couldn't get into the white Baptist churches. So they had to have their own church, right? But now, it's a little easier. But even so, let's say I go to your Baptist church and I say, hey, do you accept me as your brother in Christ? Oh, yeah, sure, man. Yeah, we both are Baptist. I accept you as my brother in Christ and give me a big hug and stuff. But then I say, do you accept me as your brother-in-law? You might struggle with that one, right? Well, So see,
that's for hours. To me, I think there's 3 stable things in society. If you look back at the beginning of time, tell me if you agree or not. Mm-hmm. And that is that if you want to have a stable civilization, you must have a stable government, a stable religion, and I don't mean a specific religion. I'm talking about a stable religion, your beliefs and following, and stable family structure. Mm-hmm. And I think that if any one of those, as they become weak, they have an impact on the other. And so for me, when I look at those 3 things, the area that I know I can have an impact on first is my family. And through my family, maybe I can help other families, and maybe as a shift over time, we can start to influence the governments and the religions in such a way. I have to say that religion probably influences me in a way that I consider to be aligned with the very opposite of what you're talking about. However, that being said, I do also see that the participation in mainstream religions is going down, not up, across the planet. So, and I do see
more spiritual or whatever.
Yeah, and I see that the concept of prosperity preaching is something that has come in vogue and is out there and is a concern in terms of providing stability. Because we're in this VUCA world, right? This volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. That's a military term from the 1980s after Desert Storm. You're probably familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And how do we provide stability? And I look at you right now as a catalyst to providing stability in a VUCA world. You have an enormous experience that 99% of people don't have. You're willing to express and acknowledge gratitude, which a lot of people, true gratitude, which a lot of people, and we see it's your gratitude that allows you to be patient. Daryl, when you're sitting there getting bombarded by some of the things that you and I would consider to be nonsense, if you didn't have that gratitude, you wouldn't be able to sit there, would you?
Well, it's also intellect and intellectual curiosity too, I think.
Well, it combines together. His intellectual curiosity, I think, comes from spirit.
And also my experience. I mean, if my first experience in encountering white people had not been in my classroom overseas and having slumber parties and stuff, but my first experience was having rocks and bottles thrown at me in the Cub Scouts, would I be doing this work today? Maybe not.
Yeah, totally different. So that's why I say you're unique in that I think you can be a stabilizer and have already been a stabilizer. And will continue to be a stabilizer. People like Nick that reach out to you to kind of gather, to get your insight so that he can spread it around. I commend Nick and appreciate Nick's efforts to do that too.
The thing that we really, really have to address, I've said it in several ways, several times, but is ignorance. Ignorance is at the root. Ignorance, if not kept in check, will escalate to fear because we fear the things that we don't understand, those things of which we are ignorant. So we become fearful and accusatory, blame somebody else. If we don't keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred and anger. If we don't keep that hatred in check, that will escalate and breed destruction. So ignorance leads to fear, which leads to hatred, which leads to destruction. A classic example of that would be 3 years ago, next month, August 12th in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the big white supremacist rally. And I know all those people down there. I know the guy personally who put together that rally. I know all those speakers. That day, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville on August 12, 2017. There was a lot of fear there. There was a lot of hatred there, and a lot of anger there that day. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his car and attempted to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving that car full force, full speed into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. So ignorance breeds fear, breeds hatred, breeds destruction. So if you want to solve the problem, it's the opposite way of how we do it, like in corporations or companies or departments, I say a police department, something like that, where it's trickle down. When management, administration is tight at the top, the subordinates down on the street or down on the company floor or whatever are going to be tight and be doing the things the right way. But when they're loose upstairs, that trickles down as well, and they're going to be loose down here on the floor and on the street. So it's trickle down. But with racism, we got to do it the other way around. We got to trickle up, all right? Because what we have to do is address the ignorance, the root cause. Forget about the destruction. Once something is destroyed, it is not coming back. George Floyd is not coming back. He's been destroyed. The next level down is the hatred and the anger. Forget about those. Those are just symptoms. Let them go. Next level down is the fear and the accusations, the blame. Forget about that. Let that go as a symptom. The root cause is the ignorance. If you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we fear what we don't know. See, if you cure the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. If there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to be angry about. And without that, there's nothing to destroy. So the good thing is that there is a cure for ignorance. And the cure for ignorance is education and exposure. And that's where we need to focus. We're focusing on destruction and fear and, the root cause is where we need to focus, the ignorance. And we can address it. Huh?
On all sides. On all sides,
absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I speak to, 60 to 80 lectures a year, a lot of mostly colleges and universities, and some corporations, police departments, churches, things like that, but mostly colleges and universities, and sometimes middle schools. And sometimes at a middle school, of course, I tone it down, but I'll be sitting there talking casually with the kids. And then all of a sudden I'll say, hey, there's a snake under your chair. And I'll point to somebody sitting in the very front row. I'll point down to the floor. And just at my suggestion that there is a snake under the chair, everybody in the front row and 10 rows back all scream and throw their legs up in the air. Even though the alleged snake is in the front row, 10 rows back, they're throwing their legs up in the air, okay? And then they realize there's no snake there, and we all start laughing. And then I ask them, I say, why'd you all yell and scream and throw your legs up in the air? And you hear things like, I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. They scare me. They're yucky and, they're poisonous and so forth and so on. Well, now there's your ignorance. There's your fear. I hate snakes. There's a hate. I'm afraid of snakes. There's your fear. They're slimy. They're poisonous. There's your ignorance. Anybody who's ever touched a snake knows they're not slimy at all. They're dry, and not all snakes are poisonous. So there's your ignorance. Ignorance breeds the fear, breeds the hatred. So then I say to them, okay, so I was just joking, obviously. There's no snake under your chair. But let's just say there really was a snake under your chair. What do you think I should do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. There's your destruction right there. And that's coming from kids. So that's universal.
To Lee's point, it's on both sides. Do you feel like there's more ignorance on one side than the other, or is ignorance just across the board? There's a level of ignorance on white people with black people, and it's kind of pretty much the same level of ignorance, and we have to cure it on both sides? Or is there? Do you feel like it's a bigger problem, in certain areas?
Well, I'll put it this way: it depends on how you want to define the level. In terms of, yes, it is on both sides, no question. It's a different form of ignorance on both sides. In terms of who has more, well, obviously, blacks are only 12% of the country. So, whites make up a lot more. So it's just like there are more white people on welfare than there are black people, even though there are a lot of black people on welfare, just proportionately. But the level of ignorance is, when you have white privilege, you don't realize what's going on outside the bubble, to people who don't have that privilege, and I use the word ignorant, not in a derogatory sense, but just in a sense of being unaware, unknowing, because that's not your experience. For example, if you were to ask 10 of your white buddies, your male buddies, just pose this question to them: what is the first thing that goes through your mind when you are coming home late one night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? Either you just got off work then, or you're coming home from a date or whatever, and you're driving by yourself some dark road, and those lights go on in your rearview mirror. You're being pulled over. Maybe you were speeding, maybe you weren't. But either way, you're being pulled over. What is the first thing that goes through your mind? You ask 10 of your white male friends, they'll probably tell you, I hope I don't get a ticket. I hope I don't get points on my license. Hope my insurance doesn't go up. You pose that same scenario to 10 of your black friends and ask them that same question. They're going to tell you, I hope I don't get shot. I hope I don't get beat up. It's the same scenario, but it's a different perspective. So there's a lot of ignorance on the black side as well, on the white side. For the white people, it's more like they haven't lived our life. And so therefore they're ignorant, not aware of what we go through, or they only see it on TV and only hear about it on TV. Because it's like, if I came to you and I said, man, the cop just beat me over the head with a nightstick, first thing you might ask me is, what did you do? And a black guy might ask me, what was wrong with him, with the cop? I might not have had to do anything. So it's a different perspective. And one's perspective is one's reality. And then there's an attitude on the black side is that it's not our job to teach white people how to treat us. Well, I disagree. I believe it is our job. Anything that you don't know, if I know, then I should teach you. If there's something that I don't know, but you have the answer, then you should teach me. And it has to be a collective, all right? Because that's what it's going to take to change this country. And I'll give you 2 examples. There have always been white people involved in our civil rights movement, starting in 1955 with Rosa Parks, all right? And on through the 60s with Dr. King. There was a minimal of white people, but they were involved. But today we see a mass of white people involved. And back then, during our protests and marches, the powers that be, in other words, the white establishment, were like this. They did not want to hear what we had to say, and they were like shutting us down. But today, that same white establishment, they're seeing more and more people who look like them marching with us. So now they're unplugging their ears or else putting hearing aids in and listening to what these people have to say. It's that collective voice that is bringing change, that collective voice. And as a result, we're seeing a widespread ripple effect as well, like we've never seen before. While these current protests were geared primarily towards the police, the ripple effect is their Confederate flags are coming down from NASCAR. Statues are coming down. Mississippi, of all places, is taking the Confederate flag out of its state flag. Food labels, Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's are changing. So we're seeing all these ripple effects happen. That's the collective voice of people causing that. Barack Obama was not put in the White House by Black people. He was put there by white people because Black people, again, only make up 12% of the population. And of that 12%, not everybody is registered. And of that 12%, there are people who are not even old enough to register. But let's just say that all 12% could vote, including little babies. All right, that still would not have been enough to put that man in the White House. We needed a large number of the white vote as well. 20 years ago, Barack Obama could never have made president. The attitude was not ready yet for white people to mark him off on the ballot and vote for him. By 2008, the attitude had changed enough to do that. So it was that collective and that's what we need to focus on bringing people together. So if my teaching you, taking the time and make it my job to teach you what you don't know is going to increase that collective, you're damn right I'm going to do it because I want to see this country improve.
Man, I love everything that you stand for, Daryl. This has been absolutely awesome. I would love to digest this, and we should do this again sometime.
Let's do it.
Maybe in a few weeks or in a month. I would love also, Daryl, I'm going to post a link here. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. I've been friends with him for a long time. His name's Ron Feemster. He's someone that if you'd like me to introduce you, I think you would really like him. He's a preacher and an extremely talented musician. If you click the link, he's won Grammys, worked with Michael Jackson and a whole bunch of people that you would know.
Sure.
Done songs that you've probably heard of. So I'll connect you two if you'd like.
Thank you.
Lee, how do you feel?
Oh, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I made a real concerted effort to kind of move things around so I could be here, Daryl. And
I appreciate that, Lee.
No, listen, it was an honor. It's an honor. And so kudos to you. Congratulations to you. And I wish you the very, very best as you continue on and hope our paths cross many times in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
I just want to say thank you again, Daryl, for your time. Lee, you're an awesome co-host. We should do this more often. This was fun. And we'll get another one of these in the books because I only covered half the questions that I had written down. And
if there's a part one, there's a part two.
All right. Thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Honestly, I don't even know what to say after talking to Daryl. His story is just so powerful, and I just think what he's doing is absolutely amazing. The fact that he has influenced so many of these people to change their ways just through simple conversation is incredible. I think his lesson that all humans want to be loved, respected, and heard is super valuable for us all to remember. Whether you're dealing with people in your business or your personal life or even just random strangers, that is a great mentality to have. I know that I'll be remembering it for a long time, and I think it's especially powerful right now as our country is more divided than ever. So anyway, if you want to check out what Daryl's doing, I would highly recommend watching his documentary. Again, it's called Accidental Courtesy, and you can find it at accidentalcourtesy.com. I've seen it. It's amazing. Just go and watch it. If you're looking for a great speaker at your event, you can book him on his website, daryldavis.com, DARYLDAVIS.com. And you'll also find some of his music there, which is pretty cool. And I would highly recommend taking a look at his TED Talk. The link for the TED Talk you can find in the show notes at getleverage.com/podcast. Now, I know I say this every episode, but I'm going to keep saying it until everyone does it. And I know there's still a few people that haven't. Please go and download our remote communication guide at getleverage.com/podcast. This will help you and your team communicate efficiently and effectively while going remote. And also do yourself a favor and subscribe, like, rate this podcast. Please share it with friends. It really helps us out. We'll see you on the next one.